Hello students, Mr. John here. Welcome to Chapter 3, Lesson 2. Today we're talking about the Neolithic Age. So let's get started. At the end of the Ice Age, temperatures warmed up and folks that survived the cold began moving into nice temperate zones, which makes sense. You want to go where you like the weather. It was at this time that people began relying on growing their own food instead of traveling around trying to find it all the time. They also began to domesticate animals. The domestication of animals involves training, but mostly breeding animals to reproduce desirable traits, like the desirable trait of not trying to eat everyone. That's good. For example, technically, your grandma's Pomeranian, right here, is the product of the domestication of wolves. They've come quite a long ways from their wild brethren, have they not? The Neolithic Age itself is really defined, well, as its starting point when people stopped doing hunter-gathering and started to rely more on agriculture. The Neolithic Age means the New Stone Age. So we have the Old Stone Age and the New Stone Age, aka Paleolithic Age and Neolithic Age. So they're synonymous with each other. And as I mentioned, that means basically they grew food regularly. With more food, population increased. The agricultural revolution, as they call it, which is basically the switch from hunter-gathering to the systematic agriculture system, is considered by some scientists to be the most important event in human history. So it's a pretty big deal. Let's talk about life in the Neolithic Age. Now that folks didn't have to travel to find food all the time, permanent housing was built because you could stay there. So why not build a nicer home? Location was important. A lot of settlements in these early villages needed to be by fields where it was easy to grow crops, but they also needed to be by a water source. One of the oldest communities was Jericho, located in current-day Israel. Really, it's in the West Bank, which is within Israel. The buildings were made from sun-dried brick houses with 7-foot thick walls. You may have heard of the walls of Jericho. Another farming community found in modern-day Turkey was Katahayuk, found in present-day, well, Turkey, like I said. The houses were also made of sun-dried bricks, but the doors were on the roof. Fine little thing there. The city also contains shrines, which are holy places. Here I found this rendition of art of ancient Jericho with its very thick walls. There were some major benefits to the settled life. It was safer. After all, it's harder for wild animals to break into your house and kill you if it's made of brick as opposed to, say, animal hide. It's also better protection from the weather. And now we have agriculture. We've got some nice houses. People are safer, and there's more food. And with more food, something called specialization became possible. This basically means that people took up special jobs other than farming. So a farmer could sell some food because he had enough food to sell some, and then buy something from someone else that could afford not to grow food because they could just buy food selling whatever it is they made. So a good example of this would be a farmer has an excess of food, he sells some to a potter, and then the potter gives him a pot. And the potter survives because he makes pots and buys excess food from farmers, and the farmer can get by using selling his extra food. It's a pretty good system. But it all became possible because of farming, because there was now an excess of food instead of just enough for everyone to live off of. In some cases, with this rapid population growth that is basically made possible by farming, the populations grew too fast, and those villages or settlements used up all the local resources too fast, and the settlements had to be abandoned because there was, say, no wood left, or not enough room to farm to make all the food for all the people that there are now. So as time in the Old and the New Stone Age progressed, so did technology. Better tools were produced as needed, like hoes and mill grinders. Basically, tools became more advanced. They got harder and smaller. People began making metal tools. It was surmised that they discovered copper by accident after heating up some rocks, and molten copper fell out. In Western Asia, tradespeople mixed copper and tin to make bronze, which was a lot stronger than standard old copper. Bronze was really expensive, though, so only basically rich people could get bronze. A lot of Joe Schmo regular people kept using their stone tools. But the period of time between 3000 and 1200 BC, when bronze became prominent, is called, well, the Bronze Age. And here we have some Bronze Age weapons. Alright, here we get into it. Civilizations emerge. So basically you have these settlements forming that are made possible by farming, and complex communities of a larger scale began to develop, and these became civilizations. There were 4 main civilizations in the Bronze Age, and they're referred to as the river civilizations. And you'll see in the book they're all located on a river. And you had Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and China. All these civilizations had a number of things in common, like each had a government. Government was in charge of things like protecting the food supply and the city. Officials managed food supplies and built public projects, things like roads and city walls and stuff like that. The earliest governments were typically some kind of monarchy, with a king or a queen in charge, generally hereditary. So you're the king because your father was the king and his father was the king before him. Not a terribly effective form of government, but it worked back then, and they would be raised to rule, so there'd be some training involved. So religions formed in these civilizations. Rulers and priests would perform rituals to win the favor of the gods. Religion provided explanations for the forces of nature, and like questions that people had, like, why are we here? What is my purpose? Religion was a large part of these early people's lives. You'll note we said gods, as we mentioned in our Religions of the World chapter. Many of the earliest civilizations were polytheistic. There were many gods, and the different gods had sort of different purposes, like god of the rain, god of farming, god of fertility, things like that. Social classes also developed. Typically the wealthy and ruling class were at the top. Priests were usually pretty far up there, as were the warrior class. Down near the bottom, sort of your regular Joe Schmo farmer and craftsman and trade people. But at the very bottom were the slaves, which were typically prisoners of war. Writing and art became more prominent in these early civilizations. The first written symbols were used to keep records, and they were a lot of time more like hieroglyphics, pictures. But the very first recordings were just marks, and I read that they were made to keep track of beer. So here we have some drinking in the ancient world, and it might literally be, hey, I traded this guy this number of this for this much of that, so I'm going to mark it on this rock. 1, 2, 3. All right, I remember I traded him 3 jugs of whatever. So that's our lesson for the day. It's a whole lot of history covered, but some very important advancements. Go ahead and move on to your assignment, which I want to talk about briefly. It's basically an essay question, and your only option for submission is text box. That just is going to make it easier for me. But you're going to answer this question in as much detail as you can. How did the agricultural revolution lead to the first civilizations? So you need to write a couple paragraphs, or 1 paragraph in the least, about how people went from hunter-gathering. Essentially, we had the agricultural revolution, and how did that agricultural revolution lead to the first civilizations? So some sub-questions you want to answer within this response. What was the agricultural revolution? How did the agricultural revolution lead to civilization? And what are some traits of the first civilizations? Also, there's a point there for spelling and grammar, so make sure you check that. So this will probably be a couple paragraphs. If I were writing it, it would probably be 3 paragraphs. But you have some room for flexibility here. Some people can be really concise. If you need help please contact me. You can stop by my office hours, however you want to do it. But all these questions are answered in detail in the lesson, and certainly even greater detail in the book. So you should have everything you need to score the maximum 10 out of 10 points. Remember, I'm looking at you people that don't like to write. More details is better, and you want these points. So keep it on. If you're worried that it's too long, you're probably in good shape. If you look at it and say this might be too short, it probably is. So that's what we're doing for the day. Let me know if you need anything. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.